Hi friends, it's kind of been a while. Recently I was invited to referee at a World Chase Tag competition. It was really cool getting to catch up with all my old parkour buddies from the early days. Since I had disappeared from the parkour scene about 10 years ago, they kept asking me like what I'd been up to and why I disappeared. So the what was easy enough, but explaining the why was more challenging for me. Once I got back home, I spent some time writing to try to put my thoughts together to express this like transformation process that I went through. So that process turned into this video where I'm going to try to explain why I shifted suddenly from being a pro parkour athlete traveling the world to a pig farmer and homesteader. So this is my story. But before I get to the pig farming part, I should fill in my backstory a little bit too so we're all on the same page. Growing up in a small town in northern Michigan, I always had a love for physical agility games and challenges like seeing how fast I could climb a tree, or attempting flips onto couch cushions, or playing tag with friends in the playground jungle gym. In high school, I saw a video of a guy doing all kinds of cool flips and gymnastics outdoors and off everyday objects. This inspired me to go to the local gymnastics gym, Water's Edge, and try to learn some flips. Through the help of the coaches there, my skills developed pretty quickly. Soon I got connected with this group that trained parkour around town, led by my buddy Mike Frosty Zernow. And we regularly filmed ourselves and made these stupid videos to post online. Ah, the good old days. Long story short though, through the online parkour community, we got involved in various parkour organizations and teams like American Parkour, the Tribe, and later joined Tempest Freerunning, based in Los Angeles. Now, this was at the time where very few people in the States were doing parkour at a professional level of skill. And parkour was just exploding in popularity, both on YouTube and in various movies and TV shows. Parkour! So we were able to kind of ride this wave of popularity and had doors opening left and right. Let's see. A few of the highlights were performing parkour in Madonna's Confessions World Tour, working on TV commercials for K-Swiss, Toshiba, Ford, AT&T, Philips. I was a parkour stunt double for the TV show Chuck. I got to double Jeremy Renner for the film Bourne Legacy. And I briefly doubled Chris Evans' Captain America in the original Avengers movie. I also competed many times on the game show Ninja Warrior. What can I say? I'm kind of a big deal.
Back in '82, I used to be able to throw a pigskin a quarter mile.
Are you serious?
I'm dead serious.
But for real, I definitely had a surplus of self-confidence from all that success and took a lot for granted too. Basically, I was living the dream, traveling the world with friends, making money doing what I loved. And I'll always be grateful to all the friends who made those opportunities possible. But these travels also opened my eyes to a side of the world that's often hidden from view. For instance, while visiting Hong Kong, I saw children swimming in rivers full of trash and chemicals. While living in Washington, D.C., I witnessed a drive-by shooting, and when I tried to tell the cops, they dismissed it as unimportant because we were in a predominantly black neighborhood. Living in Los Angeles, as I would drive up and over the mountains to audition for stunt gigs, I saw this thick brown cloud of smog hanging over this endless megalopolis of concrete buildings and streets and cars and very few trees. And I could smell the fumes in the air while I trained. I sensed that there was something seriously wrong with the world, and I knew deep down that my naive dream chasing was somehow contributing to it. Around this time, some friends pointed me to a few documentaries and books that opened my eyes to many of the troubling global trends. Let's see, one fact that hit me hard is that all this jet setting around the world was contributing to CO2 pollution, which obviously, besides contributing to climate change, it also gets absorbed by the ocean, causing it to become more acidic. Now, ocean acidification has caused phytoplankton populations to decline by 40%, and they continue to decline. Phytoplankton produces at least half the oxygen we breathe. So just imagine trying to train parkour with half your lungs missing. Another hard-hitting realization is that all the plastics we use in our food and drink containers, they contain endocrine-disrupting chemicals like phthalates that have likely caused a 50% decline in male fertility in the last 40 years. I bet you guys feel that one in the balls.
Almanac!
And although renewable energy like solar and wind do help reduce CO2 emissions, they still depend on a fossil-fueled supply chain of mining non-renewable minerals like cobalt and lithium and create toxic byproducts. So they're not a silver bullet solution. The ongoing expansion of cities and subdivisions and industries that we depend on are causing the widespread fragmentation and loss of wildlife habitat, which is leading into a mass extinction event at the scale and pace of the one that killed the dinosaurs. And all that's just the tip of the iceberg. So sorry to sound alarmist here, but seeing all the record floods and droughts and hurricanes and wildfires and heat waves already happening across the globe, the situation clearly warrants alarm. I always kind of vaguely knew about this stuff on an intellectual level, but it wasn't until I did more research and also matured a bit that the implications of all this really hit me. But when it finally did, every part of me was like, fuck, fuck. Everyone around me was going about their daily lives as if everything was normal, while I felt like civilization had been delivered a terminal diagnosis. I seriously considered becoming one of those guys that stands on the corner waving a sign that says, "The end is nigh." But instead, I decided to dive into research looking for solutions. I discovered a quote that really captures my feelings at that time. One of the penalties of an ecological education is that one lives alone in a world of wounds. Much of the damage inflicted on land is quite invisible to laymen. An ecologist must be the doctor who sees the marks of death in a community that believes itself well and does not want to be told otherwise. Aldo, Leopold. I learned about a psychological bias called the normalcy bias, in which we tend to assume that things around us will remain relatively the same throughout life and act based on that assumption. It's also why the events like an unexpected death or divorce or the loss of a job can be so jarring. I also learned about the 5 stages of grief, which I found relevant: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. I went through a phase of depression myself because I couldn't easily extract myself from the industrial systems causing this destruction. I mean, that would take a lifetime of skills and tools and really a whole tribe. So, so lacking that, I found myself repeating the same habitual patterns of driving to work and buying products shipped halfway around the globe and generating trash. Except now I had this added anxiety and guilt of the addict who can't quit and is knowingly killing himself slowly. It was a dark place. I had to confront the deep psychological dimensions of this crisis. I think it's normal to push those feelings down and ignore them in order to function in daily life. Denial is the first stage of grief after all. Then one winter's day around this time, I was walking meditatively in the woods, and while contemplating the trees, my fear and anxiety about all this stuff somehow sublimated into a full-bodied love and gratitude for life. Not just my own life, but for these millions of other species and their unchoreographed dance of buzzing and bleeding and flying and crawling and fucking and killing and eating and shitting that makes my silly little life possible. I know all the cussing sounds irreverent, but I'm using that language as a crutch to express my love for life. So it's reverent cussing, I guess. In addition to this love and gratitude, I also felt a yearning to find my proper role in this dance of the 10,000 things. Because while modern society may be acting more like a parasite on the planet right now, that's not how all human societies operate. Some cultures know how to live a less destructive, more sustainable way. A way of being that adds to the beauty of this crazy dance of life instead of diminishing it. By the way, somehow studying science turned me into a hippie. But that experience also changed how I viewed the natural world. Beforehand, plants and nature were just backdrops or scenery on which the human drama played out. And most trees were fun parkour obstacles to play on. But mostly I didn't pay them much attention. Now I see that their story is intertwined with my story, and our story as a species. So I pay attention, try to learn their names and their growth patterns, and especially notice any threats. Watch the emerald ash borer spread through the forest I grew up in, killing all the ash trees, which is like 20% of the trees in that forest. And now there's this deadly beech bark disease spreading and killing the beech trees. I mean, these trees are the pillars of the ecosystem. They're keystone species, providing food and habitat for hundreds of other species. So we can't keep losing them at this pace. So wherever you live, I would encourage you to look, pay attention, because this is happening. I think one of the cultural factors that's making this crisis so much worse is how disconnected we've all become from nature. We've surrounded ourselves with almost entirely human-made environments and human-centered stories, so we don't see the signs of change happening. So I try to remind myself to look, pay attention. This is happening. Fortunately, I discovered that there are a ton of people already working hard on strategies to navigate this crisis, including movements like localization, ecosystem restoration, regenerative agriculture, transition towns, permaculture, natural building, environmental justice, cooperatives, indigenous rights, and the rights of nature, just to name a few. The thing is, no one has all the answers. But not everyone overcomes an obstacle the same way either, right? Each person has to ultimately find their own path, but we can still definitely build on each other's innovations and techniques. In light of all this, my priorities in life shifted radically. I pretty much dropped out of the whole entertainment biz and moved back to my hometown. This was a huge risk because, I basically had an open door to a dream career as a professional stuntman, and I didn't exactly have a plan back home, but I just knew that my energy and resources could have a bigger, more positive impact than in entertainment. I was privileged to have inherited some vacant land from my family where I could experiment. My solution sandbox. No, really, the soil here is literally like beach sand. I also connected with the local indigenous tribes, organic farmers, homesteaders, plant people, animal people, forest experts, and many more who helped me get oriented. Because in the beginning, I had no real practical skills. I could do backflips really well, and I kind of knew my way around computers. But otherwise, I had no clue on how to build a chicken coop or set up irrigation or even grow a tomato. And it was a steep learning curve. I made a lot of mistakes in those early years. Working with friends, we planted dozens of trees, but almost all of them died because they dried out or the deer ate them. It was kind of like learning a new free running move. The first few tries I would usually bail and land on my face. But with enough practice, I would figure out some key tricks like mulching the trees with wood chips to hold in moisture and protecting them with tree tubes. But that sense of persistence and playful experimentation that I learned from parkour really helped, and eventually my roots started to grow. Oh yeah, and then the pigs showed up. Actually, what happened was a farmer friend and mentor, Mark Baker, visited my property and saw how terrible quality the pasture was. The vegetation was sparse and mostly brambles, so it wasn't ideal for large-scale veggie growing or grass-eating livestock like cows. So he recommended pigs because they'll root up the brambles and create a fertile seedbed for more diverse pasture species to take hold. So I started with 2 pigs, and it turns out Mark was absolutely right. As I moved the pig pen around and seeded into their old plots, the pasture thrived. Now, I was aware that feeding pigs grain feed grown on some other farm wasn't an environmentally responsible system. So I started picking up the old expired produce from the local organic food co-op and fed the pigs almost entirely on this food waste stream. It's kind of like how when you have good flow in parkour, you're able to use an obstacle to redirect your momentum into, creative new movement. So instead of these waste streams being like this big ecological disaster, we can redirect their flow to help feed healthy growth in other places. I gradually scaled up the operation and at one point had a total of 16 pigs and was like breeding them and everything and selling pork to a local restaurant and all the while, improving the health of the pasture and recycling food waste. So it was a win-win-win. But it wasn't always easy. The pigs would get into all sorts of mischief, like stirring up a ground hornet nest or getting stuck by a porcupine or escaping their pens. And from a business point of view, it was more or less break even. But I'll have to regale you with the pigtails another time. But the overly romanticized presentation of the farm life or off-grid living that you typically see on social media tends to hide the more challenging and ugly and bloody parts of this very real way of life. But it's still worth it. Let's see, some other fun stuff I've been up to was working for a local nonprofit, Seeds, doing after-school environmental education for disadvantaged youth, which was a blast. I tried my hand at building with natural materials like clay and straw, hosted educational workshops, raised free-range chickens, and planted tons of trees and shrubs, and got them to survive eventually. And built gardens and shared homegrown food with friends and family and neighbors. One important key takeaway for me is that I couldn't have done any of these things just being some loner hermit in the woods trying to chase the self-sufficiency myth. It made me realize how much potential we have for positive change when we work together with a local group of like-minded people. Plus, it's just way more fun sharing in the joys and challenges with others. I mean, it's more fun training parkour with some friends, right? That reminds me, I was recently at a convenience store and started chatting with the owner who grew up in a small village in India. And he was telling me how, although his village was poor financially, everyone in the village looked out for one another, and so no one's needs went unmet. Unemployment and homelessness were unheard of. He explained that one person is just one, but one and one makes 11. So I know it sounds cliche, but it really is worth reconsidering how much potential we have when we work together. Now, you may be wondering if I still train parkour. Well, I'll be honest with you. My days of doing roof gaps and backflips off second-story balconies are probably behind me, but I'll always love creative movement. I never had any qualms with parkour. In fact, I love parkour, and especially you, the parkour community. And I've been known to bust out the old jumpy, flippy legs on occasion. But don't be expecting any new showboat videos coming out. So where do we go from here? From just about any perspective you can take on this, our species is at a crossroads. What path we choose to take from here will have a profound impact on the lives of people living hundreds or thousands of years from now. I know it sounds like hyperbole, but if you talk to the scientists who pay close attention, you'll hear the same message. In many ways, our language fails to convey the gravity of the situation. Right now, our decisions, good or bad, are leveraged to the hilt through cheap fossil energy and massive institutional debt. This will only last for the blink of an eye on a geological timescale. So look, pay attention. And if you feel anxiety and despair floating at the periphery of your awareness, then I encourage you to take time and space for yourself to fully and honestly confront it. Maybe go for a walk in the woods. Confronting existential despair is not an easy thing to do, but this is one obstacle that we can't go over or around. We have to go through it. And in fact, stepping up to the profound challenge of this moment can cut through the fog of triviality and emptiness that's descended on modern society and give our lives a deeper sense of purpose and meaning. Do you remember that old philosophical quip that was embedded in the ethos of parkour in the early days? I'm not sure if it comes up much anymore, but I remember the old saying, George A. Bear, who said, be strong to be useful. I feel like this idea is worth contemplating, especially now. Because now that we're strong, we have to ask ourselves, how can we be most useful given where we've come to and what's now at stake? If you're wondering what you can do, I've included some links to resources in the description that you can check out. But also, stay tuned, because I'm putting together some more videos to do a deeper dive into how we got into this mess and how we might find our way out of it. P.S. Quick housekeeping item. You probably noticed the box here in the upper right corner. I call this the gratitude box, and I use it to reference the sources of the info I'm sharing. You can find the actual citations associated with each number in the video description below. Basically, I want to make it clear that unless I'm telling a personal story, almost none of the ideas and stories that I'm sharing are my original ideas. I'm more of an idea DJ who remixes other people's ideas in fun new ways. So just because I don't verbally state the name of a source of an idea doesn't mean I'm trying to take credit for it myself. There's a few reasons I'm doing it this way. First is that I would end up saying so many random names of authors and books and studies and articles that it would make the actual story I'm telling harder to follow. Plus, sometimes I'm not directly quoting from the source, but I'm interpreting it in my own way. So I don't want to misrepresent something and would rather let the author's work speak for itself. This is actually the same convention used in books when they include a citation number within the content, but don't explicitly call out the source each time. It just makes for smoother writing and listening. And as always, if you think I'm misinterpreting or misrepresenting a source, or if a source's validity is questionable, then I hope you'll respectfully let me know so I can look into it and fix up any mistakes and fill in any blind spots. Obviously, in communicating ideas, I feel the responsibility to do my due diligence and represent the facts as faithfully as possible. But no one's perfect, and I don't have a team to help me fact check everything, so I have to crowdsource that to you all, if you'd be so kind. And cheers.